G'day, I'm doing this new thing, a little experiment where instead of writing out my stories, I just say them to the camera, and it frees me up a bit of time to actually write out and finish the ones that I've started. And I know it's just a bit of an experiment. So last night I was having a shower and another idea popped in my head, and I was like, cool. I'm probably not going to school tomorrow for supply teaching, so I'll have time to sit down, relax, have a coffee and do it. But at the last minute I got called up to go to school, and it just so happens that I'm at my primary school teaching. I'm in the car park of my primary school that I went to, and I'm teaching, that's my primary school, German and science to grade 4, 5 and 6. So it's going to be an awesome day. It'll be interesting at the very least. Anyway, the story, right, I've only quarter thought of it up. I've thought of the start and the end, so I'll just fill in the bit as I go. So there's this old guy. This is the start of the story. There's this old guy. He's about 85. He's in a retirement home, and it's a bit of a sad case. He's, sort of stuck in this little room. He's got a single bed, a little set of drawers, one of those little wheelie tables that moves around, and he can't really get out of, he's got a wheelchair in there as well because he's got like ulcers on his legs and he can't move around. So he's sitting on his bed and he's just telling stories to his friend, and he's sort of, it's a bit of a sad story. He's like a heartbroken old man. His name's John. He's a heartbroken old man, and he's sitting on his bed because he can't really move around, and he's just talking to his friend, and he's basically like going through his love life and how his life has not turned out the way he wanted it to. So he started with his first story. He said, I was sitting under a tree out the back of my girlfriend's place when I was about 16, and we were talking about getting married and what our future would look like. And the picture that we came up with was both of us sitting around in the kitchen, making cups of teas for each other. And because we know each other so well, we don't really have to speak. We sort of like just move around the kitchen. Like, that classic romantic sort of old person couple where they just sort of never bump into each other. They're just sort of moving around the kitchen. Oh yeah, here's your newspaper, that sort of thing. So that was the story. Well, there's my fellow teachers. Anyway, so that's sort of a story. Yeah, sort of romantic in the sense that like it's the sort of thing you'd see in a movie. So he was sitting under the tree out the back of his girlfriend's place. Just, they were going through that. So that's how it's going to be. Then her dad got home from work, and he had to go home, and she had to jump on his motorbike, go for a ride. I don't even know where they were going. But yeah, she jumped on the motorbike and they had a crash and she died. Bang, end of life. So that never came to fruition. So even that energy that he put into that story just seemed to disappear into nothingness. She died, the story ended. Then he went along a little bit further, and he was about 20, he'd had a few girlfriends in between, sort of talked about similar stories, but not quite the same as how he spoke about it with the first girl. Then he met another girl who was quite different, but he basically fell in love, and he fell in love. They both fell in love. Everything was going along. He proposed to her. He's like, this is the one. He proposed to her. They got married. They had cups of tea and orange juice in the house that they bought, and then she just left him. So that didn't happen either. And yeah, so yeah, that's the end of that story. So she left him, and he sort of spent from about 25 to about 50, not really, or for the rest of his life really. He never really had a few more relationships, but he just never got to any depth because he was like, this love thing's not for me. So then this is the part of the story I haven't made up. Anyway, he became like a really cool uncle. He was like the memories uncle. So he just sort of, he would tell stories, and with the same vigor that he'd sort of told and had that story under the tree with his first girlfriend, he just told stories to his nephews and nieces, and all those stories will just go down in history and in minds of his nephews and nieces. But he never had a wife of his own, and that was the end of that story. He eventually ended up in this little room by himself, ulcered legs, not, no love. He's sitting there talking to his friend, just describing all this. And then the friend's like, yep, okay, cool. And the friend, because that's the other thing I forgot to mention. But anyway, he's not real good at, he's a bit of a bitter old man. People don't like him. And he's really good at talking. As he spoke to his nephews and nieces, he was like just a good speaker, and he's quite manipulative as well. So he could, like, because he couldn't move around because of his legs, he'd still be able to, like, he'd know people, and he'd be like, if I say these 3 things, they'll definitely stay around, and they'll give me some attention, or they'll get me an orange juice or whatever it is. So whether it was like nasty or nice, he could just manipulate people. Sometimes he'd just be like charming old man. The nurses would love him, but then he'd give it a week, and then he'd just go kablam and say, you're a bitch. And then that was the end of that story. And then so he was sitting in the bed telling the story of his life to his friend, and the friend was just sort of like, yep, okay, cool. And then the whole time that he's telling these stories, she's filling up cups of tea, putting it on his tiny little table, and got the newspaper for him, put it on the table, sort of opened it for him, listened to his stories, and then he just started getting super bitter, and he's just like, he started swearing, which he didn't usually do, and he's like, fuck this, fuck life, fuck love, it's all shit. And she's just kept listening, and she's like, okay. And then he just started attacking her, and then she's like, oh, that's nice. And then she'd been like helping him for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then she sat down on his bed, and I haven't worked out the end of this story, but if I wrote it, I might write this bit a bit more romantic. But she's basically sits down and says, they're all great stories, John. They're very entertaining. Thanks for telling them to me. But would you like to hear about my story and what I went through in love? And he said, sure. And then he sipped his cup of tea. He didn't open the newspaper because he was going to listen to his new girlfriend. And she opened up and told him about her first love. Start of story, or end of story. So anyway, thanks for listening. Subscribe to my channel, because not every day, but as my stories pop into my head and my heart, then I will just say them. And I'm going to write quite a few as well. So yeah, wish me luck with school today. I wonder what memories will pop up at my primary school. That's the dentist, that little orange building. That building there. There was a Friday afternoon, I think that they just, in Friday afternoons, they just shift kids around to different places where they reckon they'll be quiet. So they put me in that room there, and they're like, well, you're doing singing. And I was like, get fucked, I'm doing singing. I'm like grade 5 boys don't sing. And they gave all the songbooks out, and they're like, sing. And I was like, nah. I was a pretty good boy, but I was like, fuck off, I'm not singing. And it was like I was like the first of the new age kids, because kids these days, if you say like, not even singing, just say, oh, just open your books, and they'd be like, nah. So it's not even angry. They don't like disagree in an angry way. They're just like, this is a soft refusal. What do they call it? People that didn't go to Vietnam. Not even as energetic as a conscientious objector. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but in that room there, that was the first time I was like, nah, not doing what you say. It's all good. Now I'm frigging back here. If I get put in that room today, I'm going to get mad at some kids. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.